So what experience do you look back on and go, man, now that was really cool?
I saw some movie. I don't know if it was last night or what. Yeah, it was Deadpool. Last night I flipped it on when I got home because there was nothing on, and there's some superhero on there, and he goes, "You got this whole life as a superhero, but there's only 5 moments that count, you know." And blah blah blah. And I was thinking, yeah, you know, that's kind of like anybody's career or whatever, you know. I'm like thinking, yeah, you know, we did a session with John Lennon. I do interviews on that every year still, you know, like 35 years later or whatever it is. I still do interviews about my 5 hours in the same room with John Lennon, you know, and drum for. We backed up Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley and Freddie Cannon and Del Shannon in 1973, and that still gets mentioned, probably because I've mentioned it in the press before too. You know, that was like a bucket list thing, drumming for Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley. And you know, there's a few things like that. Budokan turned out to be like, you know, this huge thing in our career at the time. You know, it's like there's another gig in a you know, a judo arena in Japan. You know, but so yeah, those are the big ones. John Lennon and Budokan and Chuck and Bo, you know, or this and that, you know, stuff like that.
Now I understand you've sat in with probably a number of bands, but one comes to mind is the Beach Boys.
Oh yeah, those are more recent ones. Yeah, a few years ago, down by Peoria, I went and saw them at a fair down there, and they broke the fair record of like 140 years. Like 20,000 people showed up. Oh. And I know Jeffrey Foskett, the guitar player, and he was Mike Love's. He's Mike Love's guy, and he was with Brian for 15 years, and he was with the Beach Boys for 20 years. He said, "Come on down." I got down there, and hey, let me introduce you to Mike. And you know, Mike Love's like, "You still practice? You still play?" I said, "Yeah, every day." You want to play tonight? I was like, "Sure. What are we doing?" You know. You know, help me, Rhonda? I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "We're on in about 20 minutes now." So I run out, and John Cowsell's the drummer. I'm like, "Which ending are you doing? You know, how do you play it?" You know, stuff like that. And yeah, I got up and I ended up doing 5 songs with them that night, and that was like really cool because I saw the Beach Boys when I was 14 in Chicago.
Yeah.
And then a few months ago they played Rockford, and I went down there again. It's like, "Hey, you want to get up and do some?" So I did a few tunes with them then too. Yeah. And that's like the coolest thing in the universe, to get up with someone when you were 14, you paid money to go see, and then they're asking you to get up and play. I mean, that's really cool. So yeah.
Anybody else you played with like that? Do you remember?
The guys from Aerosmith jumped up one night to do "Train Kept a Rolling," but Joey didn't want it because he didn't like my drum set, you know. So I was up there and I was like, "Oh, this is cool," you know. There's been a bunch of those kind of things. Dave Edmunds showed up at a bunch of gigs in England in '79 and sat in with a band, and Roy Wood, who was a big hero of ours from The Move and ELO, he got up a few times and did stuff with us, and then we got up and backed him up in 1995 and did some Move songs and Roy Wood's Wizard songs. And so those are real special, like, musical moments. The guys I used to go buy their records, and then suddenly I'm on stage with them or something. You know, it's like the coolest thing in the world. You know?
Now, what did Joey not like about your drum kit?
It wasn't set up the way he liked it. Joey Kramer plays sticks like this, you know, and I play like normal drumsticks, and things like that. So it's just, you know, he didn't want to sit in.
Yeah. So Wikipedia describes you as Cheap Trick's set lister and archivist. So you developed the set list for the shows?
Well, me and Rick used to write them back in the old days, pre-album days, pretty much, and then we started out as kind of like we started doing arenas and stuff. You know, we got to have a set list. It's got to, you know, how do the other guys do it? So I was the big record collector, so I was like, well, you know, here's how the Stones do it. You know, they do this, and they do a rocker, then they do a couple of these, and they do a slow song, then they introduce some new material. You know, then they on the home stretch they go out with the hits. You know, we would talk about stuff like that, and then you write a set list and you basically play it the same way for most of the gigs on that tour, for the light man and the sound man and the effects and all this kind of stuff, and someone knows when to go get the car ready if you're leaving, and I'm getting this fly swatter out. Got him. And so we're taking care of business here.
We are, but he can multitask, that's for certain.
And I used to write set lists, and then you know, everyone would consult on it and stuff like that. But you know, these days, you know, the band likes to change the set list up every night. I was never a big fan of that. You know, the light man wanted to kill you, and the sound man would be scrambling and stuff like that. But and we weren't the Grateful Dead. You know, we didn't have the deep set list someone like that has. You know, but I was always the archivist. I used to go buy cassettes and bring them out, give them to the sound man, or have a cassette machine and set it at the board. And then that morphed into DAT tapes, and that morphed into CDs, you know, and drop boxes and stuff like that. But yeah, I got a few thousand shows sitting in the basement and stuff, and I was kind of the guy that remembered the lists and stuff. So yeah, that was kind of my little chore in that part of things.
Right.
I'd make the pre-show music tapes. That was the most fun.
Oh yeah.
Making a mixtape, you know, and stuff, and I'd work on it in the off season and bring it out for the tour. And of course, the only guy that ever listened to it was the sound man, you know, because he's stuck out at the board.
Yeah.
But it was fun to do. I got those songs on Greetings from Venezuela. I used to play all the time, you know, for Cheap Trick fans, you know, my favorite tunes or something.
Right. Okay, so who would you still like to meet that you haven't, whether they're still here or gone?
You know, I always kind of wanted to meet some of my heroes, like some of the Stones, but 1977 we opened for the Kinks for a few weeks, and they were big heroes of mine. And after that tour, I didn't buy a Kinks album for like 20 years because they weren't always the nicest guys on the planet and stuff like that. And you know, they didn't like giving us sound checks, and Ray always wanted to kick back for us being on the tour and crap like that, you know. So you got to kind of watch out when you meet your heroes. So yeah, like one day at O'Hare Airport, here comes Charlie Watts, like walking with some guy, and he's walking like he's in a hurry. He's got his head down, and I'm like, I want to reach out and go, Charlie, you know, and say hello or validate my fandom. I love you. I've seen you. You know, you start listing how many records you got and how many shows you've been to, because that's what fans do when they see you. They validate their fandom. And I'm a fan of the Rolling Stones. And I went, nah, he looks like he's in a hurry. And luckily, because he was on his way home because he had a big fire at his house that day or something, I read the next day in the paper. So, you know, it'd be fun to meet some of the Stones because, of course, I'd love to sit down with them and have a few drinks and go, I got about 4,000 questions to ask you. You know, so yeah, that'd be fun. You know, I always want to sit in with these guys. Like, I'd like to sit in with the Stones. I'd love to drum some tunes for Dylan, you know. You know, when we opened for The Who and they had Kenny Jones, I'm sitting on some road case back there going, I should just go up and knock this guy off the drums and sit down because I can do better than that. I was getting kind of hot under the collar, and you know, and I didn't do that obviously. But, you know, so yeah, the bucket list guys are the same guys that were 50 years ago. All my heroes, you know, from when I was a kid. All the guys whose records I bought.
So Charlie would probably be your number one.
Well, I met Ringo back in 2010, so he's no longer on the bucket list, you see. So he would be number one, then Charlie. I met Dave Clark a few times in England.
Wow.
We have a mutual friend over there, and that was the coolest thing in the world, hanging with Dave.
Yeah.
You know. And Ginger Baker, Keith Moon, and Mitch Mitchell, they're my next three big heroes, you know, a few years later. As you start to get better, you know, your heroes are like that too. I met Mitch Mitchell in 1979 with Clem Burke, and Mitch bought me a beer.
Wow.
He gave me his phone number to give him a call because he was looking for some drums. And of course I lost the phone number. And I found it 30 years later and immediately tried the number just in case. And of course it was no good. Keith Moon I met in 1970. It was a few months before he died. We were doing an interview in the same restaurant, and Keith and Pete were there doing an interview with Trouser Press, and we kind of stopped by on the way out to say hello, and Keith was kind of like, he was drinking like a fish, and he was completely out of it, so I really didn't get to meet him.
Yeah.
But I'd met Townsend when I was in 1968. I snuck in with a roadie when they were playing in Chicago and helped get his drums out of cases and stuff, and did a little interview with Pete Townsend when I was like 17, you know.
Oh, cool.
And Ginger Baker, I've hung with him a few times, and he's a fun guy if you don't ask about cream or something.
Yeah.
Then he wants to kill you.
Yeah.
But otherwise, he's a fun guy. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, the bucket list heroes, they're pretty cool guys to meet, you know.
Oh yeah.
If they don't kill you, you know.
Yeah. Keith Moon, he was He was a mess.
He was a wild man, you know.
Wasn't he?
I got one of his drumsticks at home because he was bouncing them off the drums, and one come down, and I grabbed it, and like 5 guys jumped on me and stuff. But you know, because sitting out in the audience, you know, when I was a kid.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, what is your favorite Cheap Trick song to play?
We used to get that question, you know, often. Back when I was on the road with him, I'd always go, "Good night now," because I meant you were done, you know. And Cheap Trick, you know, it was a lot of work to do that stuff, you know. It was full out 100% balls to the wall for 80 or 90 minutes. So, so yeah, Good Night now is always like, wow, made it, you know, made it through this night. And that was fun for live gigs. But you know, anything off the first, second, or third album is always a gas to play. I have set up gear at home and practiced along with those songs before tours and stuff like that. So yeah, they're all fun ones to play. You know, stuff you've done on the road or stuff, good recordings and stuff like that. You know, when I'm home. I'm home all the time now. When I'm home, I practice every day. I practice along. My first bit of drum practice is I got a drum set that's muted up with the drums and the cymbals are muted, and I put on a pair of headphones and I play a Beatle record. I throw on a Beatle album.
Oh, okay.
And it's you know 14, 15 songs. Takes about 35 minutes, and just play along with Ringo. And
that's how you practice.
That's how I start practice. And anything before Sgt. Pepper's real good because a lot of that stuff they did live and it's got a good feel and the arrangements are drummer friendly and stuff like that. And then I go to a live kit, another kit in the room that's not muted and all that, and just play alone and mess around with stuff.
Right. Your drum solo, who the king? Who is the king?
We be the king.
Okay.
See, we're all the king. You know, that kind of stuff. Who is the king of the whole wide world was if you listen to the lyrics in the end, these deep lyrics that go ooh la moolah. That's the king. Was the almighty Buck probably? But no, Rick wrote that for a B-side, and we were doing the album with George and Jeff and Montserrat, the Beatles guys, and it was time to do it. And he's like, "Well, let's get some drums together." We did 24 tracks of drums, you know, and playing brushes on a leather piano seat and playing drums and dinging on a bottle and doing all this stuff, and then getting the kitchen staff in to help sing it with us because they were all Montserrat natives and stuff like that, and they would sing like "We Be the King" and "Who Be the King" and stuff. So it sounded good with us guys from Chicago, you know.
Oh yeah.
And stuff, and then we had about 50 people do more overdubs in London for vocals. Rick gave me writing credit on it, and that was real nice of him. Thanks, Rick. And you know, that was a cool song. But the drum solo, when we started off, we were called Cheap Trick. It was kind of our reaction to prog rock, like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and stuff. In 1973, all these bands, they had laser lights and keyboard players that did this, and guys that wore capes, you know, and sissies and goofballs up there. It just didn't look right. Didn't look like our idea of rock. So when it came time, you know, Bunny, you should get a drum solo for the show. I was like, well, I'm going to do the solo no one can follow. You know, the solo when you walk away, no one's going to forget this guy did a drum solo. And it's not going to really have time to clear a dance floor because that's usually what a drum solo did because it was 20 minutes long and it was out of time. So I got these drumsticks and I'd get up behind the drums and do about a 30-second drum solo. And it was the solo no one would forget. You know, because it was like, "Cripes, did you see that guy?" You know, and stuff like that. So, yeah, my drum solo is kind of more like an anti-drum solo. You know.
So, where do you find those?
These are ProMark sticks. Coincidentally, I endorse ProMark these days, but I didn't back in the old days. They're display sticks for music stores, I think. But boy, they're made out of maple. I'm pretty sure they're pretty heavy. You got to kind of hold them in the middle to really be able to play them. Yeah.
So
these have been used, you know, there's a chip here and a chip here, and yeah, ruined a lot of cymbals with these and wrecked a lot of hardware and stuff like that because it really does a number on your gear, you know. You hit it with something like this.
Something heavy.
You know, yeah.
So is Huda King the only...
I wouldn't play these on Huda King. Huda King was just basically a drum pattern. I would play these at the end of Good Night Now. Like if you listen to it on Budokan, at the end of the song there's a thing with it, and you hear the guitar feeding back and the bass going. He's doing that, and I'm standing up with these going. They don't sound real. They don't mic up real good because they're not real clanky. They're too heavy, you know. Little drumsticks sound a lot better than these do.
Yeah.
But you know, I used these for about 5 years, from about '75 to like late '79. When I got new drums, then I didn't want to use them because I didn't want to wreck the drums.
Right. But they're very cool.
Well, the ultimate. And I have a pair at home that are 6 feet tall, about this big around. We got made for a couple stadium gigs, and for the encore, the roadies ran us set up this crappy. We would go to buy some like crummy drum set and throw it on stage for the last song for the encore, right in the middle of the stage, and we'd do Good Night Now, and I'd play on my regular kit, and then I would jump off, and they would walk me into these sticks because I would have to hold them like this, and they were this big around and as tall as I, and I could only pick them up like this, and you'd hit the kit about 3 times, and the kit would go poof, and just fall apart.
Wow.
So I have a pair of those I used on 2 gigs, and that was just ridiculous. That was like, we didn't want to keep going to music stores and buying kits, and we didn't have that many stadium dates in 1978, so yeah, I did. That was the end of that kind of. It was just kind of like, yeah, we've taken this joke as far as it's going to go.
Yeah.
There's one other little drum solo I do. It's the start of Ain't That a Shame, and I talk about it in drum clinics because there's like 5 or 6 licks in a row with a little keeping time, and then do another lick, and one lick's from there's a Keith Moon lick, and one's a Bev Bevan lick from Looking On album. Keith Moon licks from I Can See for Miles, one of his drum overdubs on the track. A couple of them are Ringo licks and stuff like that. Because I remember when I was putting the intro together, I was like, I gotta have some cool licks here, and I was like, well, what are my timeless licks? You know, that I really think are the coolest licks, and so that's kind of what I put in. So when I did my little mini drum solo on Ain't That a Shame, it was kind of like premeditated, all these little licks. They sound kind of off the cuff, but they're really not.
Yeah.
you said goodbye, gotta say my tears fell away. Ain't gotta say yeah, I don't wanna you broke my heart. Yeah, I went apart. Ain't gotta say my tears fell away. Ain't gotta say yeah, I don't wanna
Did you guys ever play the Warehouse in New Orleans?
We played the Warehouse in like 79 or 80.
Did you?
It was hotter than heck in there.
Yeah.
Board tape sounded terrible too, as I remember. Yeah.
Well, you know, everybody always comments about how well the audio is inside the recordings.
In the room, yeah.
In the room. Because of, I guess, the wood and...
I've got a Who bootleg from down there, and it's a line tape, so you really can't tell what the room sounds like. But yeah, the crowd's going nuts, you know. And the Warehouse was legendary because ZZ Top had played there, and I think maybe some of the tracks are on one of the early records. I forget.
Fandango.
But yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, we're going in the Warehouse. This is going to be cool. There was a place, the Agora in Cleveland had this reputation too. We're going to the Agora. This will be cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there once in a while you'd hit a room, it was like the reputation preceded it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
When we were out with Kiss in 1977. We did Canada from coast to coast and came down the West Coast. And I remember sound check at the Cow Palace. I jumped off the riser and went down the other guys and I said, you know, we're on a stage here. The Beatles played here. We're on the same stage as the Beatles. You know, this is really cool. And a few years later, we played Meriwether Post Pavilion, and it was like Hendrix played this stage. Same, we did a couple in Chicago like that. You know, it was like I'm on the same stage Hendrix was on.
Oh wow,
so
isn't that awesome?
That kind of made it worthwhile. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. This year in June, you released your first solo album, right?
Yeah. Greetings from Venezuela.
Yeah.
My solo album. Yeah.
Yeah, Greetings from Venezuela. And I own a copy. I bought it on Amazon.
Thank you, Daryl.
Got to download the electronic edition and then receive the CD in the mail, and love it.
Oh,
Absolutely love it. Of course, you know, I loved what I heard live last night. It was you and the guys. It was
The band last night, they're on like 5 songs in the record.
Yeah. That's what they were telling me last night. I got to meet them all and. About that album. What inspired you to create it?
You know, back in the 70s, you know, it was always, we had the hit records, and then, you know, people, can you do a solo album or anything? And, you know, Tom ended up leaving the band in 1980 to do a record with his then wife. And people would ask us, and me and Rick were always like, yeah, you know, we should do a record. We'd get like Bon Scott and Roger Chapman and all these guys, all these guys, and do some real heavy rock songs that, like, Epic doesn't like Cheap Trick to do. You know, Epic never wanted us to get too heavy or too dark. You know,
really?
they like the pop side of things.
Yeah.
And it was always like, boy, it'd be cool to do this or do this. And of course, we never did it. And then when the Hall of Fame announced we were getting inducted, I got a call, and I was like, yeah, Cheap Trick's going to piggyback a record with the Hall of Fame. And I was thinking, yeah, you know, bands used to piggyback their record with ours, you know, or whatever, when it came out. And now we're piggybacking with someone else. So I thought, well, I'll piggyback Cheap Trick's record with my own record. So I called the office and said, yeah, maybe I'm going to do this record. I cut a couple tracks the previous year and went, this is too much work. Because a sound man had got a hold of me and said, why don't you do your long lost solo album? I was like, yeah, I should do that. And I went and cut a couple tracks and went, yeah, this sucks. I don't want to do this. This is a bunch of work, making a record. I forgot how much work it is. You got to get musicians and studios and rehearsal time, and you got to have a clue what's going on, all sorts of stuff, And I started it and stopped it. I spent like 6 hours in the studio and stopped it. And then I was like, yeah, I'll do this. So this was like January of this year. So I was like, yeah, when do they need this? Well, they need it in March. I was like, I better get moving here. So I started this thing about 6 months or a year after I probably should have. And then so I got on the phone and started calling, singers up and stuff. I figured for bands, I could use, I was 2 bands in Rockford, my high school band and the Monday night band. My high school band got together a couple years ago to play our 45th reunion. And I was like, we could do the 60 songs of the high school guys. And then I have a side band in Chicago we play once in a while and record called Candy Gold. And it's John Stewart from Wilco and Rick Rizzo from 11th Dream Day. And Nick Tremulous, who was an island artist in the 90s. And Mark Greenberg, who runs Wilco Studio, plays keyboards. I was like, I could always use these guys on a track or two. So suddenly, we need the album in 60 days. And I was like, I got to get some singers, and I had a list of tunes. I've had a list of tunes for 40 years, and had about 100 songs on it. So I was like, who do I like? I went hit my record collection, who do I really like here? And so Robert Pollard, I got a hold of him, the guy that I voice a singer, because I'm a massive fan of theirs. And I said, I got a GBV song when we toured together. You guys used to do this, And yeah, let's do that, sure. I said, can you do a cover tune? And he said, yeah, send me some stuff. So I sent him about 15 tunes, and he picked another tune. And so I booked a weekend in Chicago, and I did that with Alejandro Escovedo. Mm-hmm. I had a song of his I wanted to do. And I said, can you do another song too? And he said, sure. I said, can you do a Stones tune? Yeah, tell me, it'd be great. And so I did that with a few guys, and then some others. I went in with the Monday night band, and we cut some tracks, and I sent those out to a couple different singers. And I did the same with Candy Gold in Chicago. And each guy from Candy Gold sang a song. And so I got it. It's like 8 singers for 13 songs.
Now, were all of the guys that played last night, have they all played on that album?
Kevin didn't.
Okay.
Kevin he sings Johnny Cash with us, and he just recently started playing guitar, so we didn't need him in the studio. He didn't come in, but Rick and Dan. Dan sings Japanese bonus track, You Ain't Going Nowhere.
Oh, wow, okay.
A Dylan tune. Yeah. And because we needed a tune at the last minute for Japan. It's like, Japan's putting it out, they need a bonus track. They need it Thursday. So we cut it on a Monday, and had it mixed on a Tuesday, had it mastered on a Wednesday, and got it to him by Thursday.
Wow.
Type of thing. So we kind of did the album like that. I do 2 songs this weekend. I did Candy Gold in there and cut 4 tracks. They'll sing 3 of them. I sent one down to the Hansons. They nailed that. We did a Paul Revere and the Raiders tune.
Yeah.
I didn't know how some of these were going to turn out, and especially the ones I sent tracks to singers. There were 4 or 5 I sent out to singers, and I was just like, geez, I forgot to ask them what key they wanted it in. I just cut the track and sent it. I was like, see how this goes. And then I was like, God, I hope I like this. What if I don't like it? What am I going to do then? Am I going to call this guy up and go, thanks, you're not on the record. And luckily they all came back, and I was just like, this shit sounds great. I love this. This is great. So I lucked out. All these people chipped in and really did the whole billion yards for me and stuff like that. And so it started off as a solo record, but it turned out to be like a cooperative type of thing with everybody that's on it.
Right. Well, I guess it was a little bit of a challenge to decide what songs that you were going to put on the album, wasn't it?
Well, it was only a challenge because I had too many songs picked. Don't know if I got him, but I think he's traumatized.
I think he's crippled.
Yeah. It was 8 singers, there was 5 bass players, there's a few guitar players, and there's 1 drummer. So it was a fun record to make, because we only did 2 or 3 songs at a time. So we'd cut the tracks, and if the singer was there, we'd do the vocals, and we would finish the tracks, the couple tracks. So you didn't have some guitar player coming in week 3 and doing 14 songs in 2 days, and it all sounds like he did them all in one afternoon. We didn't have any of that kind of stuff going on.
Right.